taught kindergarten for 20 years, and I'd start seeing the children with fetal alcohol, prenatal exposure to fetal alcohol come into the kindergarten. I took a real interest in it. My sweetheart and I have since adopted 2 children through the state system, and they were both diagnosed with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. FASD is such a confounding disability. It's not everyone looks the same, not everyone manifests their brain injury in the same way. Alaska is far ahead of the country in a lot of ways in providing services and diagnosis for children with fetal alcohol, and that's because Alaska has the highest rate of fetal alcohol in the country, and we've been at it for a long time. In Alaska, it's 1.63 per 100, so 1.5 kids in 100 will have the full facial features and the organic brain damage, but 90% of the children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders don't show the face. And so that's saying that in Alaska there are about 15 children, every 100 kids, there are 15 kids that are born with it. Now there are 10,000 children born in Alaska every year. And I'm not good at math, but that's a whole lot of kids that are affected somewhere along the spectrum. Maybe they have planning difficulties, maybe they have memory problems. And so it's a lot of children that we're seeing coming into the schools and the prisons, unfortunately. In Alaska, in our juvenile justice system, 40% of the inmates are considered to have prenatal exposure to alcohol. And it's really a tough thing to say that a birth defect will end you up in jail. And they're guilty, they're guilty, but they don't have the capacity to understand the crime that they committed. If we go back to 1960 and I wanted my son to go to school and he was in a wheelchair, I would have had to carry him up the stairs. Now some people would say that's enabling it, but it's to a good cause. Nowadays, since the Americans with Disabilities Act, every street corner has a cut curb. Every federal building, every state building has ramps and elevators. In 1960, if you told people you're going to have to cut every curb in every town, they would have said you were really crazy. But we made that accommodation because it's morally and ethically the right thing to do to give people access to education and all these other services. With fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, it is very much the same. It is a physical disability that happens in the head and plays out in behaviors. And so what we need to do is to make those kind of accommodations, not cutting curbs, but with understanding of the people around them. The people around the person with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder are the ones who have to make those accommodations for that person. They have to enable that person to be able to live out a more full life. And it can be done, it has to be done. You know, people in suits have told me, well, Mr. O'Malley, we can't do that. And I come back and I say, maybe if I use small words and speak slowly, you'll understand this is what you must do. I met a woman and she asked me about my son. And I told her, oh, well, my son is in jail right now. And I said it very offhandedly. And she was like, shocked. Then she asked me, aren't you worried about him learning bad things in jail? And I said, no, he doesn't learn very well anywhere he is. And she was dumbfounded because I seemed to be really lighthearted about it. Like, I'm not worried about him learning bad things in jail because he doesn't learn very well. But it's kind of the truth. You get inured to it after a little while. You kind of get matter of fact. You get realistic, your expectations change for the best. I don't start with high expectations, I start with realistic ones. I start with high expectations for institutions and I try and hold them to that because they're the people who really can do, they are the ones who can really help. They're the ones who can cut the curbs. My kid can't do that. He relies on other people to be his cognitive wheelchair to be his brains. And I've been an advocate for people to step up to the plate for that. It's understanding. That's the cut curb. That's the elevator. That's the ramp. If you can spread the understanding among teachers or parents or service workers about children's difficulties and how they manifest in the behaviors, that's the best thing you can do for the children. A lot of times, because fetal alcohol spectrum disorder plays out in difficult, annoying, and criminal behaviors, the parents are often blamed. Poor parenting skills. My son used to be able, when he was young, we'd go to the store and he would be able to make it so far and then he would lose it. Sometimes we would leave baskets of groceries in the store, but one time we were stuck. Already started checking out and my son started to decomp, and my sweetheart was there, and a woman in the next aisle over gave her that look, you know, if you would just control your child. My sweetheart became unglued, and she turned to the woman and yelled at her, "This is what happens when mothers drink during their pregnancy. This is fetal alcohol." And everybody kind of stepped away like, whoa, you know. That was something else. I don't think any mother wants to harm her child. I'd really believe that. People have asked me over the years whether I blame the birth mothers of my adoptive children for their drinking, and I've come to believe that they were victims too, and that the real abusers are the institutions, schools and governments and health service systems that know but don't do anything about it, that set up barriers for services and diagnoses. It has been really difficult to see my son grow up and have him so different than I am, not because he chooses not to follow in my footsteps, but because he can't. And it's not a matter of volition. It's a matter that he has organic brain damage that keeps him from planning ahead, from being motivated, from knowing what to do next, from knowing how to get involved with other people in a positive way. So it's difficult. It's part of the grief, I think, is that your children are going to grow up so different than you, and they're not going to have the potentials that I had, no matter what I do. And we've pretty much done everything we could think of. There's a certain amount of grief associated with birth defects, and with something like fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, there is even more of a feeling of responsibility, and that grief is really hard to, it doesn't go away. That grief just got me after like 20 years. I think parents would do anything for their kids. And if they're given the right information, they would do everything they could to prevent. I'm an advocate, and I'm motivated and sent forward by my children because they can't speak for themselves.